Cops storm a school to arrest a black janitor for theft, unaware she's the secret principal. Like, subscribe to FAM, and hit the bell to catch our latest gripping stories. The double doors of Lincoln High School's main entrance exploded inward with a crash, the sound reverberating through the crowded hallway like a gunshot, as 4 police officers in dark uniforms charged inside, their boots pounding the tiled floor, their shouts slicing through the mid-morning chatter of students and teachers. "Evelyn Carter, you're under arrest," bellowed Officer Mark Reynolds, a white man with a face carved from granite, his hand gripping his holster as he zeroed in on a middle-aged black woman in a gray janitor's uniform, her mop frozen mid-swipe near a row of lockers. Evelyn Carter, her sturdy frame unbowed, her salt and pepper hair tucked under a faded cap, stood still, her sharp brown eyes locking onto Reynolds with a defiance that sent a ripple of unease through his steely gaze. The hallway erupted into chaos, students spilling from classrooms, their phones flashing like paparazzi cameras, capturing every second of the spectacle as Reynolds barked, "Hands up, Carter! You are coming with us for theft!" The accusation was a thunderclap, igniting a wave of jeers from a clique of students led by Kaylee, a blonde junior with a venomous sneer, who shouted, "Thief! She's been ripping us off all year, Miss." Deborah Holt, the history teacher, leaned against a locker, her thin lips curled into a smug grin, her eyes glinting with satisfaction as she watched the scene unfold. Evelyn raised her hands slowly, her movements deliberate, her face a mask of calm despite the cuffs snapping onto her wrists, the cold steel biting into her skin as the officers yanked her forward. "You're making a mistake, officer," she said, her voice low but resonant, each word a challenge that made Reynolds pause, his scowl deepening as he shoved her toward the exit. The crowd surged, a sea of taunts and laughter. "Lock her up, and she doesn't belong here." Their words a barrage of prejudice that had shadowed Evelyn for months, from spitballs in her cleaning cart to racial slurs etched on bathroom walls, from teachers' dismissive glances to students' cruel pranks. But this arrest, this public crucifixion orchestrated by Holt and her class, who claimed Evelyn stole cash from a student's locker, was a calculated assault, a bid to erase her from Lincoln High before she could finish what she'd started. Kaylee stepped forward, her voice piercing the din. "You thought you could get away with it, didn't you? Nobody trusts you." And the crowd roared, their phones raised, but Evelyn's gaze cut through the noise, locking onto Holt, whose smirk faltered under the janitor's unflinching stare, a silent warning that sent a shiver through the teacher's confidence. Reynolds tightened his grip, dragging Evelyn past the trophy case, where a lone black sophomore, Aisha, pushed through the crowd, her voice trembling but fierce. "She's no thief. This is wrong." Kaylee shoved her, snarling, "Stay out of it!" But Aisha's cry echoed, a spark of resistance that fueled Evelyn's resolve. She wasn't just a janitor, she was Evelyn Carter, the principal of Lincoln High, working undercover for 6 months to investigate a wave of racial bullying that had driven Jamal Harris, a black student, to suicide last spring. His death was a wound that burned in her soul, a call to action that had led her to trade her office for a mop, to slip into the shadows and collect evidence, recordings, graffiti, whispered confessions that exposed a clique of bullies and a faculty complicit in their silence. The theft accusation was a lie, a desperate move by those who sensed her closing in. But Evelyn was ready, her evidence hidden in a locked closet, her mission etched in every step she took. As the officers hauled her through the hallway, the crowd's jeers grew louder, but Evelyn walked with purpose, her head high, her heart a furnace of determination. Holt trailed behind, her voice dripping with false piety. "You brought this on yourself." "Evelyn." Stealing was bound to catch up. Evelyn turned, her gaze a blade that pierced the teacher's facade, her voice low and lethal. "You're playing with fire, Ms. Holt. Be careful it doesn't burn you." The words hung heavy, Holt's face paling, and Reynolds hesitated, his grip loosening for a moment, but he shoved her toward the waiting squad car, its lights flashing like a beacon of injustice. Outside, students and staff pressed against the windows, their phones recording as Kaylee shouted, "Good riddance!" But Evelyn's mind was elsewhere, replaying Jamal's laughter, the evidence she'd gathered, the names she'd uncover. The car door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness. But Evelyn leaned back, her lips curling into a faint, defiant smile. The precinct loomed, a fortress of suspicion, but she was no prisoner. She was a principal, a warrior, a woman who'd turned grief into purpose. The cuffs were tight, the crowd's hatred still rang, but Evelyn Carter was playing a deeper game, one where truth would be her sword and justice her shield, ready to shatter the lies that thought they could break her. The precinct's holding cell was a concrete cage, its flickering fluorescent lights casting jagged shadows across Evelyn Carter's face as she sat on a metal bench, her wrists still raw from the cuffs that had bound her during the public arrest at Lincoln High School just hours ago. The air was thick with the stench of bleach and despair, but Evelyn's sharp brown eyes remained steady, her sturdy frame unbowed, her mind a steel trap piecing together the events that had led to this moment. 4 police officers storming the school, the jeering crowd led by Kaylee, the smug smirk of Miss Deborah Holt, the false theft accusation that had branded her a criminal before the entire student body. She'd been released at dawn, no charges filed, just a curt, "You're free to go," from a desk sergeant who avoided her gaze. But the sting of the ordeal lingered, a fresh wound layered over months of daily indignities she'd endured as a janitor. Evelyn wasn't just a cleaner, she was the principal of Lincoln High, working undercover to investigate a wave of racial bullying that had culminated in the suicide of Jamal Harris, a black student whose death had shattered her heart and fueled her mission. The theft setup was no accident. It was a desperate strike by those who sensed her probing, a bid to silence her before she could expose the rot within the school. As she stepped out of the precinct, the Chicago morning was gray, the air heavy with the threat of rain. But Evelyn's resolve burned brighter than ever, her hidden badge a weight she carried in her soul. She returned to Lincoln High, her mop and bucket a familiar shield, but the school's hallways were a minefield. The whispers louder now, the stares sharper. Students snickered as she passed, their voices dripping with venom. Thief's back, and why she's still here, while teachers like Holt cast sidelong glances, their silence a tacit approval of the cruelty. Kaylee, the blonde junior who'd led the taunts during the arrest, leaned against a locker, her clique giggling as she tossed a crumpled soda can into Evelyn's cart, sneering. "Clean that up, janitor." Evelyn paused, her grip tightening on the mop handle, but she kept her face neutral, her eyes flicking to Kaylee's with a quiet intensity that made the girl shift uncomfortably, her bravado faltering for a split second. She'd endured this for months, spitballs in her supplies, slurs scrawled on walls, coffee cups accidentally spilled for her to mop. But each act was a clue, a thread in the web of bullying she was unraveling. In the janitor's closet, hidden behind a stack of cleaning supplies, Evelyn kept a locked box, its contents a growing arsenal of evidence. Photos of graffiti targeting black students, recordings of Kaylee's taunts, notes passed in class mocking Jamal's memory. She'd overheard Holt dismissing complaints about bullying, her voice cold, "Kids will be kids," and seen teachers like Mr. Grayson, the math instructor, turn a blind eye to racial insults in his class. The school was a tinderbox, its culture of prejudice festering under a veneer of respectability. And Evelyn was close to naming the ringleaders, a clique led by Kaylee, protected by Holt's inaction, possibly encouraged by her bias. But the arrest had raised the stakes, exposing her to scrutiny that threatened her cover. That afternoon, as she scrubbed a hallway, a group of seniors, egged on by Kaylee, surrounded her, their laughter sharp as they knocked over her bucket, dirty water pooling at her feet. "You're not fooling anyone, thief," Kaylee spat, her phone raised to record. Evelyn stood, her uniform soaked, her voice low but cutting. "Keep talking, Kaylee. Every word's a nail in your coffin." The threat hung heavy, and Kaylee's smirk wavered, her clique falling silent as Evelyn's gaze pierced through them, a reminder that she was no victim, Aisha, the black sophomore who'd spoken up during the arrest, watched from the edge, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. And Evelyn gave her a subtle nod, a silent promise of protection. The bell rang, scattering the group, but the incident left a mark, the whispers growing darker. Some students now called her trouble. Others feared her quiet strength. In the staff room, Holt cornered Evelyn, her voice a venomous hiss. "You're on thin ice, Carter. One more misstep, and you're gone." Evelyn met her gaze, her smile cold. "I'm not the one who needs to watch her step, Ms. Holt." And the teacher flinched, her confidence cracking. But Evelyn turned away, her mind already on the evidence she'd gathered tonight. After hours in the deserted school, she slipped into the closet, her flashlight illuminating the locked box as she added a new recording. Kaylee's voice, caught on a hidden device, bragging about teaching Jamal a lesson. The words were a gut punch, confirmation of the clique's role in his death. But Evelyn needed more: names, motives, proof of Holt's complicity. As she worked, a noise echoed in the hall, a shadow moving past the door, and her pulse quickened. Someone was watching, someone who knew she was more than she seemed. She locked the box, her heart racing, but her resolve unshaken. The school was a battlefield, the community divided, and Evelyn was running out of time to expose the truth. Tomorrow, she'd face Holt's class again, their taunts a daily gauntlet. But each step brought her closer to justice for Jamal, for Aisha, for every student crushed by prejudice. Evelyn Carter was no janitor. She was a principal, a warrior, and she'd fight until the lies burned away, leaving only the truth in their ashes. The air in Lincoln High School's third-floor hallway was thick with the scent of chalk dust and teenage bravado. But for Evelyn Carter, the janitor whose mop glided silently across the tiles, it was the weight of 100 staring eyes that pressed hardest, their whispers a venomous hum that followed her every step since her arrest and release days ago. Her gray uniform hung loosely on her sturdy frame, her salt and pepper hair tucked under a faded cap, but her sharp brown eyes burned with a quiet fire, a defiance that no taunt could extinguish. She'd endured months of bullying, spitballs in her cart, slurs on walls, spilled coffee meant to humiliate. But today, the school's hostility crystallized into something sharper, a trap set to crush her spirit and drive her out for good. It began in Miss Deborah Holt's history class, where Evelyn was called to clean a spill that didn't exist, a pretext she recognized as soon as she stepped into the room, the students' smirks and Holt's cold stare confirming her suspicions. Kaylee, the blonde junior who'd led the jeers during her arrest, stood at the front, holding up a crumpled envelope, her voice dripping with mock outrage. "This was in my locker, Miss Holt, $50, gone." And guess who was seen near it this morning? The class erupted, fingers pointing at Evelyn. Their accusations: thief, and she's at it again. A chorus orchestrated by Holt, whose thin lips curled into a triumphant smirk as she turned to Evelyn. Her voice icy. "Carter, this is serious. Stealing from students is unforgivable. I'm calling the principal and the police." The words were a guillotine, and the class cheered, Kaylee tossing the envelope onto a desk as if it were evidence in a courtroom, her clique giggling while others, like Aisha, the black sophomore who'd defended Evelyn before, sat frozen, her eyes wide with fear. Evelyn stood still, her mop handle gripped tightly, her heart pounding not from the accusation, but from the clarity of its intent. This was no prank. It was a calculated strike to bury her, to silence the investigation she'd been conducting, the school's undercover principal. A mission to expose the racial bullying that had driven Jamal Harris to suicide. She'd collected damning evidence, recordings of Kaylee's taunts, Holt's inaction, graffiti targeting black students. But this setup threatened to unravel her cover before she could act. "You've got no proof, Evelyn said, her voice low but resonant, cutting through the room's clamor, her gaze locking onto Holt's, whose smirk faltered for a split second, betrayed by a flicker of unease. Kaylee stepped forward, her phone raised, recording the confrontation. "Proof? Everyone saw you snooping around." "You're done, janitor!" The class roared, but Evelyn's eyes flicked to Aisha, whose hands trembled, and she gave the girl a subtle nod, a silent vow to protect her. Holt dialed the office, her voice loud for effect. "We need security and the police. Carter's a thief, and we won't tolerate it." Within minutes, the hallway filled with students, their phones flashing as two officers, Reynolds from the arrest and a younger cop, Officer Lena Brooks, arrived, their presence reigniting the crowd's frenzy. Reynolds scowled, his hand on his cuffs. But Brooks, a black woman with a keen gaze, hesitated, her eyes studying Evelyn's calm demeanor. "Let's hear her out," Brooks said, her voice firm, but Holt cut in, her tone dripping with false concern. "She was caught red-handed, officer. This isn't her first offense." The lie was blatant, and Evelyn's jaw tightened, her mind racing. She could reveal her identity now, end this farce. But exposing herself too soon would jeopardize her evidence, let the bullies slip away. Instead, she turned to Brooks, her voice steady. "Check the locker logs. I wasn't near them today. And while you're at it, ask Miss Holt why she ignored Jamal Harris's complaints before he took his life." The room gasped, the name Jamal a lightning bolt that silenced the jeers. Holt's face paling as if struck, Kaylee's phone lowering slightly, her bravado cracking. Reynolds frowned, but Brooks's eyes narrowed, her hand pausing on her notepad. "Jamal Harris? The suicide case?" she asked, her voice sharp, and Evelyn nodded, her gaze unyielding. "Ask her why she let his bullies walk free." The accusation hung heavy, the crowd's murmurs shifting from mockery to uncertainty. Aisha's eyes filling with tears as she whispered, "She's telling the truth," Holt stammered, her voice shrill. "This is irrelevant. She's deflecting from her crime." But Brooks raised a hand, her gaze locked on Evelyn, a spark of recognition in her eyes, as if sensing the janitor was more than she seemed. Reynolds, impatient, grabbed Evelyn's arm, his cuffs glinting. "Enough talk. You're coming with us." The crowd cheered, Kaylee's voice rising. "Get her out!" But Evelyn walked with purpose, her head high, her heart a furnace of resolve. The officers led her through the hallway, students jeering, but Aisha pushed forward, shouting, "You're wrong about her," only to be pulled back by Holt's glare. Outside, squad cars flashed, the crowd swelling, but Evelyn's mind was elsewhere, replaying her evidence, Kaylee's recorded boasts, Holt's complicity, the names of Jamal's tormentors. The theft was a lie, but it had given her an opening, a chance to pull Brooks into her orbit. As the car door slammed shut, plunging her into darkness, Evelyn leaned back, her lips curling into a faint smile. Holt thought she'd won, but Evelyn was playing a deeper game, one where every taunt, every lie, was a step toward justice. The precinct loomed, but Evelyn Carter was no thief. She was a principal, a warrior, and the truth she carried would soon burn through Lincoln High like wildfire. The Chicago precinct's interrogation room was a claustrophobic box of chipped paint and flickering fluorescent lights, its metal table cold under Evelyn Carter's steady hands as she sat across from Officer Mark Reynolds, his scowl deepening with every silent second, and Officer Lena Brooks, whose keen gaze studied Evelyn like a puzzle she was determined to solve. The air was heavy with the weight of the false theft accusation that had led to Evelyn's second arrest in a week, the sting of handcuffs still fresh on her wrists, the echo of Kaylee's jeers and Ms. Deborah Holt's smug accusations ringing in her ears from the chaotic scene at Lincoln High School. Evelyn's gray janitor's uniform hung loosely on her sturdy frame, her salt and pepper hair tucked under a faded cap, but her sharp brown eyes burned with a quiet authority that made Reynolds shift uncomfortably, his fingers tapping the table as he leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "You're wasting our time, Carter. We've got witnesses, an envelope, your prints near the locker. Confess, and maybe we go easy on you." Evelyn's lips curled into a faint, defiant smile, her silence a weapon that unnerved him, her gaze flicking to Brooks, who scribbled notes, Her brow furrowed with curiosity. She'd planted the seed in the classroom, mentioning Jamal Harris's suicide and Holt's negligence. And now she saw it taking root in Brooks's eyes, a spark of doubt that could shift the game. Evelyn wasn't just a janitor, she was the principal of Lincoln High, working undercover for 6 months to investigate the racial bullying that had driven Jamal to his death. And this arrest, orchestrated by Holt and Kaylee's clique, was a desperate attempt to stop her. Her evidence, recordings, photos, notes, was hidden in a locked closet at school, but the time for shadows was over. "You want a confession?" Evelyn said, her voice low but resonant, cutting through the room's stale air like a blade. "Here's one. I'm not the thief here. The real crime is what happened to Jamal Harris, and you're sitting on it." Reynolds scoffed, but Brooks leaned forward, her pen pausing. "You mentioned Jamal before. What do you know?" she asked, her voice sharp, and Evelyn seized the opening, her gaze locking onto Brooks's. "I know Holt ignored his cries for help. I know Kaylee and her friends tormented him until he couldn't take it. And I know you've got a file on his case that's been buried too long." The room crackled with tension, Reynolds' face reddening, but before he could interrupt, the door burst open and a precinct captain stormed in, his face pale, a phone pressed to his ear. "Reynolds, Brooks, step out. We've got a situation." The officers exchanged glances, but Brooks hesitated, her eyes lingering on Evelyn, who nodded subtly, a silent pact forming, alone. Evelyn leaned back, her heart pounding with the weight of what was coming. She'd called her deputy principal, a trusted ally, from a burner phone before the arrest, instructing him to alert the school board and prepare her evidence. The precinct was about to learn the truth, and Lincoln High would never be the same. Minutes later, the door opened again, and Brooks returned, her face a mix of shock and respect, followed by the captain and a suited man from the school board, his expression grim. "Ms. Carter," the captain said, his voice strained, "we've just been informed of your position. Is it true you're the principal of Lincoln High?" Evelyn stood, her presence commanding, her voice steady. "I am Evelyn Carter, principal, acting undercover to investigate racial bullying that killed one of my students. Your officers arrested me on a lie, and I'm here to set it right." The room fell silent, the captain's jaw dropping, Brooks's eyes widening, and Reynolds, re-entering, froze, his cuffs dangling uselessly. The school board official stepped forward, his voice firm. "We've reviewed your credentials. The board supports your investigation. You are free to go, and we're launching a full inquiry." Evelyn nodded, her gaze piercing Reynolds, who stammered, I didn't know, but she cut him off, her tone sharp. "You didn't care to know. You assumed, and that's why we're here." Brooks stepped closer, her voice low. "I want in, Miss Carter. Jamal's case. I've seen the file. It's incomplete. Let me help." Evelyn studied her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, and nodded, a partnership sealed. Hours later, Lincoln High was a maelstrom, the news of Evelyn's identity spreading like wildfire. Students and staff gathering in the auditorium for an emergency meeting. Evelyn stood at the podium, no longer in her janitor's uniform but in a crisp blazer, her presence towering as she faced a stunned crowd. Holt sat in the front row, her face ashen, Kaylee slumping beside her, their confidence shattered. "I've been among you," Evelyn began, her voice resonant, "watching, listening, because this school failed Jamal Harris. His death wasn't an accident. It was a crime, enabled by silence, prejudice, and cruelty." The room gasped, students whispering, teachers shifting uncomfortably, and Evelyn's eyes locked onto Holt's, whose hands trembled. "I have evidence, recordings, notes, proof of bullying that drove a boy to his death, and I'm not stopping until every culprit answers for it." Aisha, in the back, stood, her voice trembling but clear. "She's telling the truth. They hurt Jamal, and they're hurting us." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others glaring at Kaylee, who shrank under the weight of accusing eyes. Holt stood, her voice shrill. "This is outrageous! She's lying to save herself!" But Evelyn raised a hand, her voice a whip crack. "Sit down, Miss Holt. Your time's coming." The room erupted, applause mixing with shouts, and Evelyn saw the tide turning, the community waking up. Brooks, standing by the door, nodded, her notepad ready, a partner in the fight. As the meeting ended, Evelyn stepped into the hallway, students approaching, Aisha, others, their eyes filled with hope, fear, trust. The school was fractured, Holt and Kaylee cornered, but Evelyn knew the real battle was just beginning. Her evidence was secure, her mission clear, and with Brooks by her side, she'd tear down the lies that had cost Jamal his life, rebuilding Lincoln High into a place where no student would suffer in silence again. The halls of Lincoln High School were a battleground of whispers and wary glances, the air thick with the fallout of Evelyn Carter's bombshell revelation that she was not a janitor but the principal, a truth that had shattered the school's fragile facade and set its foundations trembling. Gone was her gray uniform, replaced by a crisp blazer that commanded respect. But Evelyn's sharp brown eyes still carried the weight of her undercover mission, a 6-month quest to expose the racial bullying that had driven Jamal Harris to suicide and left the Southside community scarred. Her office, once a distant sanctuary, was now a war room, its desk piled with evidence, recordings, photos, scribbled notes that pointed to a clique of bullies led by Kaylee and a faculty complicit in their silence, with Deborah Holt at the heart of the rot. Evelyn stood at the window, watching students stream into the courtyard, their faces a mix of awe and unease, while Officer Lena Brooks, her new ally, sat across from her, flipping through a file on Jamal's case, her keen gaze sharp with determination. The precinct had handed over the investigation to Brooks after Evelyn's identity was revealed, and the two women, bound by a shared hunger for justice, were digging deeper, unearthing truths that threatened to upend Lincoln High. Brooks set down the file, her voice low but firm. "Your recordings are gold, Miss Carter." Kaylee's voice, bragging about teaching Jamal a lesson, matches complaints from other black students. Holt's name keeps coming up. She dismissed every report. "We've got a pattern, but we need more to nail them." Evelyn nodded, her jaw tight, her mind replaying the classroom confrontation. Holt's pale face when she'd mentioned Jamal, Kaylee's faltering smirk under the weight of accusing eyes. She collected enough to suspend Holt, but the teacher's influence ran deep, her allies among the faculty circling like vultures, ready to protect their own. That morning at a staff meeting, Mr. Grayson, the math teacher, had challenged Evelyn openly, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You expect us to believe you were undercover all this time? This feels like a vendetta. Carter, you're tearing this school apart." The room had murmured agreement, older teachers nodding, their loyalty to Holt outweighing the evidence Evelyn presented, a flash drive of recordings, a log of ignored complaints. She'd stood firm, her voice a whip crack. "This school was broken long before I came back. Jamal's death proves it. You can stand with me or with the problem, but choose now." The room fell silent, some teachers shifting uncomfortably, others avoiding her gaze, but the divide was clear. Evelyn was a threat to their status quo, and they'd fight to keep it. Outside, the students were no less divided. Kaylee's clique, emboldened by Holt's defiance, spread rumors that Evelyn was a liar, a fake principal out for revenge, while Aisha and a growing group of black and minority students rallied behind her, their voices rising in the cafeteria, demanding change. Aisha slipped into Evelyn's office during lunch, her eyes fierce but nervous. "They're scared of you, Ms. Carter, but Kaylee's planning something. I heard her talking about fixing this. You gotta watch out." Evelyn's heart swelled at the girl's courage, but the warning tightened her resolve. She'd seen Kaylee's phone videos, heard her taunts, and knew the clique were desperate to protect their power. She handed Aisha a burner phone, her voice low. Record anything you hear, but stay safe. We're close, Isha nodded, slipping out, and Evelyn turned to Brooks, who was reviewing security footage from the school's cameras. Look at this, Brooks said, pointing to a grainy image of Holt meeting Kaylee in a stairwell, their heads close, Holt passing something, a note, maybe money. This was the day before your arrest. They're connected, and it's not just negligence. Evelyn's pulse quickened, the pieces clicking into place. Holt wasn't just ignoring bullying, she was enabling it, possibly orchestrating the theft set up to discredit Evelyn. The evidence was mounting, but the school board demanded airtight proof, and parents, led by Kaylee's influential mother, were pushing back, flooding Evelyn's inbox with complaints, accusing her of overreaching and targeting students. At a tense board meeting that afternoon, Kaylee's mother, a lawyer with a sharp tongue, stood, her voice cutting. Miss Carter's actions are divisive. She's slandering my daughter and dedicated teachers like Ms. Holt without evidence. We demand her suspension. The room buzzed, board members wavering, but Evelyn rose, her presence commanding, her voice steady. Slander? I have recordings of your daughter bullying Jamal Harris to his breaking point. I have proof, Miss. Holt ignored his pleas. Suspend me, and you suspend justice. The room fell silent, the board chair nodding reluctantly, granting Evelyn time, but the pressure was crushing. Parents, teachers, students, all watching, waiting for her to falter. That evening, as Evelyn and Brooks pored over evidence in her office, a brick crashed through the window, glass shattering across the floor, a note tied to it. Leave, or you're next. Brooks drew her gun, scanning the darkness, but Evelyn stood unmoved, her eyes blazing. They're scared, she said, her voice a low growl. That means we're close. Brooks nodded, her resolve matching Evelyn's, and they returned to the evidence, finding a new lead, a deleted email from Holt to Kaylee, recovered from a server, instructing her to handle the janitor problem. It was the smoking gun they needed, proof of conspiracy, but Evelyn knew exposing it would ignite a firestorm. Aisha's burner phone buzzed, a shaky video arriving, Kaylee in the locker room, laughing about shutting Carter up for good. Evelyn's heart sank, not for herself, but for Aisha, for every student caught in this war. The school was fracturing, the community rallying, and Evelyn was at the center, her evidence a ticking bomb ready to explode. She looked at Brooks, her voice firm. We take this to the board tomorrow. Holt, Kaylee, all of them, they answer for Jamal. The night stretched on, the brick a reminder of the danger. But Evelyn Carter was no janitor. She was a principal, a warrior, and with Brooks by her side, she'd fight until the truth burned through Lincoln High, leaving no lie unturned. The auditorium of Lincoln High School was a cauldron of tension, its rows of folding chairs packed with students, teachers, and parents. Their murmurs a restless hum under the glare of fluorescent lights. As Evelyn Carter stood at the podium, her crisp blazer a stark contrast to the janitor's uniform she'd worn for months, her sharp brown eyes sweeping the crowd with an authority that silenced even the most skeptical whispers. It had been a week since her bombshell revelation as the school's undercover principal, a truth that had fractured the faculty and ignited the Southside community. And now, with Officer Lena Brooks by her side, Evelyn was ready to detonate the evidence that would expose the racial bullying that had driven Jamal Harris to suicide. Her office, a war room of files and recordings, held the proof: Kaylee's taunts, Deborah Holt's complicity, a deleted email linking them to the theft setup that had nearly destroyed her. But this meeting was her battlefield, a chance to confront the culprits before the school board, the press, and the students who'd suffered in silence. Kaylee sat in the front row, her blonde hair pulled tight, her usual sneer replaced by a nervous twitch, while Holt, beside her, clutched a notebook, her face pale, her thin lips pressed into a line as if bracing for a storm. Evelyn's voice, resonant and unyielding, cut through the auditorium's buzz like a blade. Lincoln High failed Jamal Harris, she began, Her words a thunderclap that stilled the crowd, cameras flashing from the back. He was bullied, targeted for his skin, until he couldn't bear it. And this school, its teachers, its students, let it happen. Today, that ends. A gasp rippled through the room, parents shifting uncomfortably, students whispering, and Evelyn raised a flash drive, its black casing glinting under the lights. This contains proof, recordings, videos, emails of a clique that tormented Jamal and others, led by Kaylee Thompson, enabled by Ms. Deborah Holt. The auditorium erupted, shouts of disbelief mixing with applause. Kaylee's mother leaping to her feet, her voice shrill. "This is a witch hunt. My daughter's no bully." Holt stood, her hands trembling, her voice cracking. "These are lies. Carter's fabricating this to save herself." But Evelyn's gaze locked onto Holt's, her smile cold, her voice steady. "Sit down, Ms. Holt. The truth doesn't need your permission." She plugged the drive into a laptop, and the screen behind her flared to life. Kaylee's voice filling the room, recorded in a locker room, bragging, "Jamal couldn't handle us. We showed him his place." The crowd gasped, parents covering their mouths, students turning to Kaylee, whose face drained of color, her eyes darting to Holt for rescue. The teacher stammered, "That's out of context. She's a child, not a monster." But Evelyn pressed play again. A second clip, this time Holt, dismissing a student's complaint about bullying, saying, "Deal with it. Life's not fair." The room roared. Aisha, the black sophomore who'd defended Evelyn, standing in the back, her voice piercing. "That's what she told Jamal. She let him suffer." The crowd's anger turned on Holt, who sank into her chair, her notebook slipping to the floor, her composure shattered. Kaylee, cornered, jumped up, her voice a desperate shriek. "It wasn't just me. Everyone did it. You can't pin this on us." Her words were a confession, a crack in the clique's armor, and Evelyn seized it, her voice a whip crack. "Everyone? Name them. Kaylee, who else hurt Jamal? Who else did you teach a lesson?" The auditorium held its breath, cameras zooming in, and Kaylee froze, her eyes wild. Her clique, 3 other juniors, slumping in their seats, their bravado gone. Holt tried to stand again, her voice hoarse. "This is entrapment! You have no right!" But Evelyn cut her off, projecting the deleted email from Holt to Kaylee, recovered from the school server, instructing her to handle the janitor problem. The evidence was undeniable, a death knell for Holt's career, and the crowd erupted, parents shouting, students cheering, Aisha leading a chant of "Justice for Jamal." The school board chair, a stern woman in a gray suit, stood, her voice firm. "Ms. Holt, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Ms. Thompson, you and your peers will face disciplinary action." Kaylee's mother screamed, "You can't do this!" But the board chair raised a hand, her gaze unyielding. "We can, and we will." Evelyn stepped back, her heart pounding, the weight of the moment sinking in. She'd exposed the truth, but the fight was far from over. Holt, escorted out by security, shot Evelyn a venomous glare, her voice a hiss. "You'll regret this, Carter." Kaylee, tears streaming, was led away, her clique trailing, their power broken, the auditorium emptied, students clustering around Evelyn, Aisha at the forefront, her eyes shining. "You did it, Ms. Carter, for Jamal." Evelyn's throat tightened, but she nodded, her voice soft. "We did it, Aisha, but we're not done." Brooks, standing nearby, flipped through her notepad, her voice low. "We've got names now, Kaylee's friends, maybe more teachers. This goes deeper than we thought." Evelyn's gaze hardened, her mind flashing to the brick through her window, the note warning her to stop. The clique was down, Holt was cornered, but someone, maybe a parent, maybe a faculty ally, was still pulling strings, protecting the rot. That night, as Evelyn locked her office, a shadow moved in the parking lot. a figure watching from a car, its engine idling. She gripped her keys, her pulse quickening, but her resolve was iron. The school was waking, the students rising, and Evelyn Carter was no janitor. She was a principal, a warrior, and with Brooks and Aisha by her side, she'd tear down every lie until Lincoln High was a place where no student would fear their own skin again. The dawn light filtered through the cracked windows of Lincoln High School's main office, casting long shadows across Evelyn Carter's desk, where she sat poring over a stack of incident reports, her sharp brown eyes tracing the names of students and teachers implicated in the racial bullying that had claimed Jamal Harris's life, a wound that still burned in her soul. Her blazer hung neatly on a chair, a symbol of her reclaimed authority as principal, but the weight of her 6-month undercover mission as a janitor lingered, a reminder of the battles she'd fought to expose the truth. The auditorium confrontation days ago had shattered the school's facade, with Kaylee's confession and Deborah Holt's suspension sending shockwaves through the South Side. But the victory was fragile, the air thick with the threat of retaliation. Officer Lena Brooks stood by the door, her notepad open, her keen gaze scanning a new video from Aisha, the black sophomore who'd become Evelyn's eyes and ears, capturing Kaylee's clique plotting in a stairwell, their voices low but venomous. Carter thinks she's won, but we'll show her. Evelyn's jaw tightened, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the certainty that the fight was far from over. The school was a powder keg, divided between those who rallied behind her, Aisha, minority students, a few teachers, and those who clung to the old order, led by Kaylee's mother and a cadre of parents who saw Evelyn as a threat to their privilege. That morning, chaos erupted as the fire alarm blared, a false trigger that sent students pouring into the courtyard, only to find lockers vandalized with racial slurs, paint cans scattered, and a banner strung across the entrance reading, "Carter lies, Lincoln dies." Evelyn and Brooks rushed outside, their eyes scanning the crowd, spotting Kaylee and her clique, 3 juniors, their faces smug despite their disciplinary hearings. Lingering near the chaos, phones raised to record the uproar. Aisha pushed through, her voice trembling but fierce. "It's them! Ms. Carter, they did this!" Kaylee laughed, her blonde hair glinting in the sun, her voice sharp. "Prove it, snitch! Nobody believes you or your fake principal." The crowd buzzed, students filming, teachers hesitating, and Evelyn felt the school teetering on the edge of anarchy. Brooks radioed for backup, her voice calm but urgent, while Evelyn stepped forward, her presence commanding, her voice a thunderclap. "Enough! This stops now. You think vandalism, lies, and hate will save you? You're wrong." The crowd hushed, Kaylee's smirk faltering, but before Evelyn could continue, a group of parents, led by Kaylee's mother, stormed the courtyard, their voices shrill. "You're the problem! Carter, you're tearing this school apart with your accusations." The accusations stung, echoing the faculty's resistance, but Evelyn stood firm, her gaze piercing. "I'm saving this school from the hate you've let fester. Jamal Harris died because of it, and I won't let another student fall." Aisha and a dozen students, Black, Latino, Asian, stepped forward, their voices rising in a chant, "Justice for Jamal." The tide shifted, the crowd splitting, but Kaylee's clique seized the moment, tossing smoke bombs into the courtyard, the acrid haze sparking panic as students screamed and scattered. Evelyn and Brooks moved fast, ushering kids to safety, their eyes locked on Kaylee, who slipped toward the gym with her friends, their laughter a taunt. Brooks drew her baton, her voice low. "They're escalating. We need to end this before it gets worse." Evelyn nodded, her mind racing. She'd anticipated retaliation, but this was a declaration of war, a bid to destabilize the school and discredit her. Security cameras, installed after the brick incident, caught the clique's movements, and Aisha's burner phone buzzed with a new video, Kaylee spray painting a slur, her voice gleeful. The evidence was ironclad, but Evelyn knew confronting them now risked a riot. She called an emergency assembly, the auditorium packed again, Parents and students divided, the board chair watching warily. Evelyn took the podium, Brooks beside her, the screen flaring with the video of Kaylee's vandalism, her voice echoing, "Carter's done. We run this school." The crowd gasped, parents covering their faces, Kaylee's mother screaming, "That's manipulated!" But the board chair raised a hand, her voice firm. "This is undeniable. Ms. Thompson, you're expelled, effective immediately. Your peers will face the same." Kaylee collapsed, sobbing, her clique escorted out by security, their power broken, but Evelyn's gaze swept the room, landing on parents who defended them. "This isn't just about students," she said, her voice resonant. "It's about us, all of us. We let prejudice grow, and it killed Jamal. Stand with me, or stand in the way. But Lincoln High will change." The crowd erupted, Aisha leading applause, students chanting, but Kaylee's mother lunged forward, her voice a hiss. "You'll pay for this, Carter?" Evelyn met her gaze, unyielding. "I already have. Now it's your turn." Brooks stepped closer, her notepad open, her voice low. "We've got more. Text indicating Bagley's group to a teacher still on staff. This goes higher." Evelyn's pulse quickened, the shadow into the parking lot flashing in her mind, the note warning her to stop. The click was down, but the rot ran deeper, and Evelyn knew the final fight was coming. That night, as she locked down her office, Aisha and a group of students waited, their eyes fierce. "We're with you, Miss Carter," Aisha said, and Evelyn's throat tightened, her voice soft. "Then let's finish this, for Jamal." The school was a crucible, the community rising, and Evelyn Carter was no janitor. She was a principal, a warrior, ready to face the last stand with Brooks and her students by her side, determined to burn away the lies until only justice remained. The south side sky was ablaze with the golden hues of dusk, casting a warm glow over Lincoln High School's courtyard, where students, parents, and teachers gathered in a rare moment of unity, their voices a soft hum of anticipation as Evelyn Carter stood at a makeshift podium, her crisp blazer a symbol of her reclaimed authority, her sharp brown eyes reflecting the fire of a mission that had begun in grief and ended in triumph. The school was no longer the fractured battleground it had been weeks ago, when Kaylee's clique had vandalized lockers and Deborah Holt's complicity had shielded their cruelty. A rot that had driven Jamal Harris to suicide and nearly broken the community. Evelyn's undercover stint as a janitor, her arrest, her bombshell revelation as principal, all had led to this moment. A reckoning that had exposed the truth and set Lincoln High on a path to healing. Officer Lena Brooks stood beside her, her notepad now a file of closed cases, her keen gaze softened by pride as she watched Evelyn address the crowd, a partnership forged in the crucible of justice. The auditorium confrontation had broken Kaylee and Holt, their confessions unraveling a network of bullying that stretched beyond the clique to a handful of faculty and parents who'd turned a blind eye. But the fight hadn't ended there. Kaylee's expulsion and Holt's firing had sparked a backlash, a final act of defiance that had tested Evelyn's resolve. Days after the vandalism, Brooks had uncovered a hidden group chat, recovered from a seized phone, where Kaylee's mother and Mr. Grayson, the math teacher, had coordinated a smear campaign, leaking doctored emails to paint Evelyn as a fraud. The evidence was damning, and at a closed board meeting, Evelyn presented it, her voice steady as she faced Grayson's indignant protests. "You enabled hate. Mr. Grayson," she said, her words a blade. "You let Jamal suffer to protect your own." The board acted swiftly, firing Grayson and barring Kaylee's mother from school grounds, a decision that sent ripples through the community, silencing the last of the old guard. The final piece fell into place when Brooks traced the brick thrown through Evelyn's office to a senior in Kaylee's clique, a boy who'd confessed under pressure, naming others who'd targeted minority students. The culprits faced juvenile charges, their families humbled, and Lincoln High's board, spurred by Evelyn's evidence, rolled out a sweeping anti-bullying policy, mandatory training, anonymous reporting, A diversity council led by students like Aisha, the black sophomore whose courage had fueled Evelyn's fight. The courtyard ceremony marked the policy's launch. But for Evelyn, it was more. A tribute to Jamal, a promise to every student who'd felt unseen. She raised a microphone, her voice resonant, carrying over the crowd. Jamal Harris deserved better, she began, her words a vow that stilled the air. He was failed by silence, by prejudice, by a school that looked away. But you chose to stand up, to speak out, to rebuild. This is your school now, and it will be a place where no one fears their skin, their voice, their truth. The crowd erupted, Aisha leading a chant of "For Jamal." As students raised signs, their faces alight with hope. Black, Latino, Asian, white, united in a way Lincoln High hadn't seen in years. Parents nodded, some in tears, others clapping, their skepticism replaced by respect. Brooks handed Evelyn a plaque, engraved with Jamal's name, to be mounted in the hallway, a permanent reminder of the cost of silence. As the ceremony ended, students swarmed Evelyn, Aisha at the forefront, her eyes shining. "You changed everything, Miss Carter," she said, and Evelyn's throat tightened, her hand resting on the girl's shoulder. "We changed it. Aisha, keep fighting." The crowd dispersed, but Evelyn lingered, watching the sunset, her heart full but heavy. The school was healing, its policies transformed, but the scars of Jamal's loss, of her own battles, would never fade. Brooks approached, her voice low. "We closed Jamal's case, but I'm staying on. This community needs us." Evelyn nodded, a partnership sealed, knowing the fight against prejudice was ongoing. That night, as she locked her office, a group of students painted a mural in the courtyard. Jamal's face, surrounded by hands of every color, a symbol of unity. Evelyn became a beacon, speaking at district meetings, inspiring reforms across Chicago's schools. Her story a rallying cry for justice. Lincoln High was no longer a place of fear, but a testament to what truth could build. And Evelyn Carter was no janitor. She was a principal, a warrior, a legacy who'd turned grief into a movement, ensuring no student would walk alone again, from a shamed janitor to a secret principal. Evelyn Carter exposed bullies and brought justice to Lincoln High. Thanks for listening. Like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell for more epic stories. Don't miss our next video.